My husband, 32M, is insisting that we impregnate his friend after finding I, 32F, am unable to conceive. I find myself in a state of shock after everything that has transpired in the last 24 hours, and I desperately need some unbiased opinions to help me navigate this situation. To give you a little background, my husband and I have been married for 4 years and together for 7. He works as a civil engineer, but his true passions lie in his hobbies, our relationship, and his friendships. On the other hand, I am an emergency medicine doctor, and my career is my absolute passion. Becoming a doctor has been my dream since I was 12, and I've worked hard to make it a reality. About 14 months ago, my husband began pushing me to get pregnant. At the time, I wasn't ready for a baby. I was finally hitting my stride at work. We had just bought our first condo together, and our lifestyle didn't really lend itself to raising a child. I didn't express my feelings to him, mostly out of fear of conflict, so I kept quiet, thinking it wouldn't be a huge sacrifice to have a baby. I thought I could make it work. Eventually, I did get pregnant, but I was miserable. Pregnancy was not something I enjoyed, and I longed for it to be over. I felt disconnected, especially from my pregnancy, and sought therapy. My therapist pointed out that I was holding resentment against the baby because I was more focused on my career than on becoming a mother. She was right, and I worked on my feelings. By the 6th month, I was genuinely excited about having this baby, and my husband and I were in a better place, having worked through my earlier resentment. However, everything changed when our baby was born as a stillbirth. I faced some severe complications that left my chances of conceiving again incredibly low. After the initial shock and the long road to recovery, I felt a strange sense of relief. I didn't want to be a mother at that moment. And while I might want children in the future, I believed this was just not meant to be. My husband took the loss much harder than I did, but with therapy, we seemed to be in a good place again, until last night. Last night, my husband approached me with a surprising proposition. He expressed his desire for us to have a child, and told me he forgave me for losing our son. He acknowledged my inability to conceive, but reminded me that he was still capable of fathering a child. I had to remind him that our options were limited. If we wanted a baby, we would need to look into adoption or surrogacy, neither of which we could afford at the moment. Then, he dropped a bombshell. He mentioned a woman at work whom he had known for years. Apparently, she was aware of all our marital issues and my health struggles. He told me they had gone out for drinks while I was working an overnight shift, and, during their conversation, she offered not only to donate her eggs but also to be our surrogate. The catch? She insisted that my husband would need to impregnate her the natural way. I was completely baffled. First, I couldn't believe he was even considering it. And second, I was shocked that this woman would offer something so intimate without ever having met me. To make matters worse, he had shared our most personal struggles with her. He excitedly told me that she had texted him afterward, saying, "Oh, I would love to have your baby." Naturally, I questioned the mental stability of this woman and my husband's judgment. I expressed my discomfort with the idea, especially since I would prefer an anonymous surrogate to avoid any potential complications or emotional entanglements. Instead of understanding my concerns, my husband insisted that having a baby was non-negotiable. He argued that this friend wanted to help us, and it would be the most cost-effective solution given our financial situation. He told me that if I loved him and wanted a baby, I should support this plan. I tried to explain that I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, and that the thought of him sleeping with someone else made me incredibly uncomfortable. He brushed off my feelings, claiming it was no big deal, and that I was overreacting. He expressed that he had stood by me while I pursued my dream and felt neglected, which was something I had never realized he felt. To add to my anxiety, I looked up this woman on social media, and she was strikingly attractive. My husband and I are both average-looking, so the thought of him being with someone like her only heightened my worries. I couldn't understand why she would want to do this for us, and I was left questioning everything about our relationship. As I sit here, I wonder if I'm overreacting. This entire situation feels bizarre, and I'm at a loss for what to do next. Should I confront my husband again? Should I consider his proposal? Or is this a line that shouldn't be crossed? I need to figure out how to navigate this complicated web of emotions and decisions. I never expected my life to take such a dramatic turn, especially when it came to something as personal as starting a family. My husband and I had always talked about having kids, but after a heartbreaking loss, I found myself facing the reality that I might not be able to conceive. It was a tough pill to swallow, and I was still processing the grief when my husband dropped a bombshell that left me utterly shocked. One evening, he came home from work with an idea that seemed to come out of nowhere. He suggested that we consider his friend as a surrogate. Yes, you heard that right. He wanted to impregnate his friend, believing it would somehow help us build a family after our loss. I was taken aback. The thought of my husband having such a close relationship with another woman, especially in such an intimate context, made my stomach churn. When I confronted him about it, he was surprised by my reaction. He asked if I was accusing him of cheating, and I had to explain that even if he hadn't physically crossed any lines, the emotional connection he had with her was deeply troubling. He admitted that he had confided in her about my struggles with motherhood and our relationship issues, which only intensified my feelings of betrayal. It felt like he was building a bond with her that should have been reserved for us. He insisted that the idea of surrogacy was entirely her suggestion, and he had only entertained it because he thought it could help us heal. But as I pressed him for details, it became clear that their relationship had crossed boundaries. She had been hinting at carrying our baby for weeks, and when he mentioned our financial limitations regarding egg donation or adoption, she offered her own eggs. The plan was taking shape, and it felt like I was losing control over my own life. I couldn't help but wonder how he would feel if the roles were reversed. If I had a close male friend and decided to have a child with him, how would he react? The silence that followed my question spoke volumes. I felt utterly betrayed, not just by him, but by the entire situation. I expressed my anger and hurt, and he seemed genuinely remorseful, admitting that he had shared too much with her and that it was inappropriate. After a long conversation filled with tears and tension, I told him I needed some space to process everything. He was desperate to know if our marriage was over, but I wasn't ready to make that decision. I needed time to think about what had just happened and how I felt about our future together. In the days that followed, I took a closer look at his communications with her. I found messages that were friendly, but crossed into flirtation, and her comments about wanting to carry our baby felt like a personal attack. She even made disparaging remarks about me, which made my blood boil. I documented everything, wanting to ensure I had a clear picture of their interactions. My husband, realizing the gravity of the situation, took steps to cut ties with her. He changed his phone number, blocked her on social media, and promised to be transparent about their relationship moving forward. He expressed his love for me and his desire to work through this, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. As I navigated this emotional roller coaster, I realized that rebuilding trust would take time and effort from both of us. I suggested that he seek individual counseling and join me for couples therapy. It was clear that we had a lot of work to do if we wanted to salvage our marriage. Through all of this, I learned that communication is key, especially in moments of crisis. While the road ahead seemed daunting, I held on to the hope that we could find our way back to each other, stronger than before. It was a journey I never anticipated, but one that would ultimately define our relationship. I never imagined that my journey to parenthood would take such an unexpected turn. My husband and I had always talked about starting a family, but when the time came, I found myself grappling with the reality that I was unable to conceive. It was a tough pill to swallow, and I felt a mix of emotions, sadness, frustration, and a sense of betrayal. The situation escalated when my husband, in a moment of misguided enthusiasm, suggested that we should consider having a child with one of his friends. His reasoning was that this would be a way to fulfill our dreams of parenthood, even if it meant involving someone else. I was taken aback. How could he think that this was a viable solution? It felt like a breach of trust, and I struggled to understand his thought process. After some tense days of silence between us, we finally sat down to talk. He admitted that he had been wrestling with his feelings and had even resigned from his job, believing that this drastic step would somehow make things better. Explaining that he thought he was doing the right thing and that it would make me happy, but I felt deeply betrayed. We both recognized that our communication had deteriorated over the past year, and it was clear we needed to address this head-on. As we talked, I realized that my husband was beginning to understand the gravity of his mistake. He had spoken with his brother, who likely pointed out how misguided his idea truly was. It seemed that my husband was starting to grasp the depth of the situation and how it affected not just our relationship, but also my feelings about starting a family. Reflecting on our journey, I recognized that my husband's desire for children was fueled by what I can only describe as baby fever. His closest friends had recently become fathers, and I think he felt a sense of urgency to join them in that experience. We were at a good age, had stable careers, and were working towards financial security. To him, everything seemed aligned for starting a family. But for me, I wasn't ready. We had just bought a condo, and I was still managing student loans. I wanted to travel and enjoy our time together before diving into parenthood. The crux of our misunderstanding lay in my silence. I hadn't communicated my feelings about wanting to wait, and instead of discussing it openly, I let my husband's enthusiasm go unchecked. He had always been supportive of my career, but I realized that I had prioritized work over our relationship. This realization hit hard when I found myself questioning whether my marriage would survive a mere 2 days of uncertainty. We also addressed how my husband had directed his frustration towards me during this tumultuous time. He didn't blame me for my inability to conceive, but it was easier for him to channel his anger elsewhere rather than confront the situation directly. We both recognized that we had work to do, and we agreed to seek therapy together to rebuild our communication and trust. As we navigated this challenging chapter, I began to consider our options for the future. Adoption might be a possibility down the line, or perhaps exploring the idea of using an egg donor and a surrogate. I still wanted children, and I believed that we could find a way to make it happen, but I needed to be ready, emotionally and financially. In the end, this experience has taught me the importance of open communication in a relationship. It's a lesson I hope will guide us as we move forward, together, navigating the complexities of love, loss, and the dream of parenthood.